All right. We're in Exodus chapter 17 this evening. Exodus chapter 17. We're going to look at verses 8 through 16. So Exodus 17, looking at verses 8 through 16. And the text says this, says, then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, choose for us men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. Whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary. So they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, while Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side. So his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the sword. And the Lord said to Moses, write this as a memorial in a book and recite it in the ears of Joshua. Then I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar and called the name of it, the Lord is my banner, saying, a hand upon the throne of the Lord. The Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. Okay, so what is the crisis, or what is the problem that Israel is facing in verses 8 through 16? What's going on there?
I don't know.
Okay, that's a good answer. If you don't know, you don't know. I would suggest maybe you go back and reread the text. Anybody else who was maybe listening?
Amalek.
All right, Amalek, and this is a group called the Amalekites. The Amalekites, and they're coming out and they're attacking Israel. Now, you have to remember that the people of Israel are newly freed slaves. They've been slave people for how long? What's the history? Anybody remember? 400 years. Yeah. So they've been slaves for 400 years. And slaves don't typically know how to fight. If you're going to be a slave owner in the ancient world or at any point, you typically don't want your slaves to know how to fight. Why?
They were rebelling against you.
Yeah, it's kind of obvious, right? I mean, at a certain point, they will rebel and they'll fight against you. So it's very unlikely that these people had any kind of real military skills. Though we do know that, Joshua seems to be a pretty good military leader and stuff. But generally speaking, what you have here is you have a whole bunch of newly freed slaves. And so this is going to be a very stressful situation, even though we don't get a whole lot of detail about what's going on with Israel, but it's a stressful situation. They have been, they've crossed the Red Sea, but they've had problems finding water. They've had problems finding food. And then again, they had problems finding water just in the first section of chapter 17 we saw last time. So they've got all these problems, and now they're being attacked by people. It's almost like the old saying, from the frying pan into the
Fire.
Yeah, it almost seems like there's so many problems that just keep coming back to back to back to back. So in light of all that, what might some of these people be thinking? What might they be thinking?
It's all over.
It's all over. Some of them could be thinking, we're going down, right? These people are going to kill us. What else?
I wish I was back in Egypt.
Wish I was back. That's something that they say on occasion too, don't they? Why did you bring us out to let us die of thirst? Why did you bring us out to let us die of hunger? Now, we don't get any description or talk of what was going on in the average Israelite's mind. But if I were there, I'm sure I'd be saying things like, what now? Like, why did you bring us out? Why did you free us? I thought you were gonna, I thought things were gonna be great. How come we're suffering like this? I mean, aren't they facing trials like all the time now?
Every time they turn around.
Every time they turn around, every few days, it seems like there's another problem. We're running out of water. We're running out of food. We're running out of water again. Now the people are coming down to kill us. Like, there's always something going on. Would you have assumed, think about this for a moment, would you have assumed that when God rescued you from slavery, that there'd be no more struggles, that there'd be no more hardships, that there'd be no more suffering? Would you have assumed that?
Yeah.
I would. That would be me. I would be thinking, this is great. God rescued us. He freed us. Now it's blue skies and rainbows and sun, right? Wouldn't you be thinking about, like, everything's going to be wonderful. Health, wealth, and prosperity. Well, that's what we might be thinking, but that's not what happens. And again, we might be thinking this because, after all, God is all powerful. He could make life easy, couldn't he?
He could, no? Yeah.
Right, he could. He could make life easy. He doesn't, though. He doesn't. So when Israel goes out to fight, and this is I'm sure this is in the mind of some of these people, but when Israel goes out to fight, where does Moses go? This is going back to the text now. We're going to think about the text.
Up on the hill.
Yeah, he goes up on a hill. Now, what is he going to do to help Israel win the battle?
Raise his hands.
Okay. All right. Think about this now. Israel's going to go out to fight some crazy warrior people coming to fight a whole bunch of slave people. Don't know how to fight probably very well. The leader is going to go up on the mountain, up on a hill. And his battle plan to help the people is to raise his hands. So does that sound like it would do anything?
No, it doesn't.
Does that sound like a very brilliant war strategy?
No.
I mean, come on. All right, let's be honest. That sounds stupid, okay? That sounds ridiculous, right? I'm going to go up, I'm going to hold my hands up on top of the mountain, and that's going to be part of the battle plan. Now, maybe, as I thought about this, I thought, okay, maybe if we think in human terms, just in human terms, what's going on, maybe this is kind of like a flag bearer. Like in the ancient world and in armies, at times they would have somebody holding the flag, and your people would be marching and fighting and all that. And it might be that when you're in the thick of battle, you turn back and you look for a moment, can you see your flag? And if you see your flag, it bolsters you up. Okay, we're still in this, we're still fighting, we still got people, our flag hasn't gone down. If you don't see the flag, or you see the flag bearer running away, you might think, we lost, I'm running too. So maybe this is a bit of morale booster. You see Moses and some, up on this hill. So I could see that maybe this is a little psychological motivation if we're just thinking in human terms. But again, I'm really stretching to try to find something about Moses up on a hill raising his hands from an earthly perspective, that would really do a whole lot. But maybe that's what's going on. All right, so how many people are with Moses on the hill?
Two plus Moses.
Three?
Total three.
Yeah, there's a total of three. You got Moses, and then you got two others. You've got Aaron and you've got Hur. So what did Aaron and Hur do? Because
They ended up raising his hands for him.
they end up raising his hands. Well, I mean, after a while,
They got him a place to sit too.
they got him a place to sit, put a rock underneath him, sit down. But I mean, after a while, you can imagine holding your arms up. At a certain point, they're going to get tired. And so you've got two other guys that come up, and they're gonna hold up Moses's arms up as as these people are coming out to attack and as they're fighting in this battle. Now the question is, what is this a picture of? This is a
Christ.
It's the cross. It's the
Yeah.
cross.
Absolutely. That's exactly what's going on. He takes the stick, and as he raises the stick, he would not have raised just one hand with the stick and the other. He would have raised it with both hands. And very interesting, you've got three people up on a hill, one on each side. You've got one in the middle, Moses in the middle, raising his arms. Interesting that every time his arms come down, what happens?
They start losing.
They lose. But every time his arms are raised high, Israel's winning the battle, right? This is a picture of Christ. We see a picture of the crucifixion. We see a picture of these things in the Old Testament. You've got three people on the hill. You got one in the middle with his arms raised up, holding up this staff. Victory is found, and we know this today, victory is found in the cross. Now, why is it important that we see this typology? Why is it important that as we go through the Old Testament, we don't just talk about necessarily the history? This is history, yes, we talk about it. But why is it also important that we recognize the typology, that we recognize the pictures of Jesus found in the Old Testament? Why is that important?
Because we trust that God is in control, and if you can see images where certain things happen over and over again, you get a glimpse into God's thinking, so to speak, putting it in human terms. But it just kind of helps tie everything together.
Absolutely, yeah. We're getting a glimpse into God's mind. It should be a recognition for us that the cross was not an accident, right? Jesus didn't go to the cross because the people who were his enemies got one up on him. And God was like, uh-oh, I didn't realize that was going to happen. I thought they were going to accept him. The cross was something that's been pictured, that's been being pointed to since the very beginning. It's important that we see that. What's that? Go ahead.
I just said it for generations, yes.
Yeah, for generations. This is important because, again, the cross wasn't an afterthought. The cross has been something God has been thinking about, planning, preparing from the very beginning. That Christ crucified and raised from the dead has always been the plan. Genesis 3:15. Anybody know what that says?
It's where he will, yeah.
He will bruise your head and you will crush his heel.
There you go.
Right. It's the gospel in seed. It's the gospel in a nutshell. He, the serpent, is going to strike or bruise or crush the heel of the man to come, the he to come, the seed to come. But that seed, that male, that singular he, is going to crush the head of the serpent. It's the gospel in a nutshell. It's what happens on the cross. That's true. But then we see these pictures, these images over and over and over again that are pointing us to Christ crucified, raised from the dead, these kinds of things. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. It's not biblical, but even in creation, the Southern Cross, that sailors and people from the very ancient of times recognized in the stars south of the equator that there was a Southern Star, the Southern Cross. Do you think that too is something that God placed there?
It is certainly within the realm of possibility, that's for sure, because we know that the creation, that the skies proclaim the glories of God, right? And the handiwork and all that. So it is certainly a possibility. We don't have anything biblically to stand on necessarily, other than those passages that talk about all creation praising God or pointing to his glory, but it's certainly within the realm of possibility. I find it interesting that if you drive around, you can find crosses all over the place. Just find it interesting. Our telephone poles are crosses, like all over the place. I was at Panera Bread, I don't know, a month or two or something ago, and I took a photo of a shadow that was on the ground. We're getting ready to come to worship service, and it looked like the cross on the, it was this shadow or whatever, but it was just, it's all around. So it would not surprise me to find that in some ways this is God in the midst of creation, because we find it throughout the scriptures, the death, the burial, the resurrection, those kinds of things. So while I can't say definitively yes, because the Bible doesn't tell us that, it would be within the character of God. It would be within the realm of what he does in scripture, as we find. Look at Abraham and Isaac. Look at the sacrifice of Isaac. You go back to Genesis and you read about the sacrifice of Isaac. If you don't see a picture of Christ there, you're blind. You haven't read it. Go back and reread it, because it's glaring. You can't help but see that. If you can't see in the life of Joseph in Genesis, if you can't see a picture of Jesus, you need to reread it again, because it's clear throughout he's betrayed by his brothers. They sell him into slavery. They throw him in a pit. He's as good as dead. He goes down to Egypt, which is the place of the dead. He raises up out of the pit, he becomes second in command only to Pharaoh. He saves his brothers and his family. Do you see, like, the whole life of Joseph is a picture of Jesus? These things should give us confidence in the scriptures, but they should also give us confidence in the God of all glory. There has been a plan from the very beginning that Jesus would come to rescue us. And it's all over the place. You couldn't build these stories. You couldn't just make all this up, because we've got more than 40 authors over approximately 2,000 years who are writing the scriptures. You can't get 3 people to agree on something in a room. Never mind over 2,000 years, 40 different authors from different backgrounds to come up with one cohesive story with all these elements that are repeated. This clearly, it's divine. And the point of this is the death, the burial, the resurrection, the crucifixion of Christ. The resurrection is all throughout the Old Testament. It's pointing us forward to our ultimate rescue, the one who is going to come. So this is very important that we see this. The caution, I would say, is that we need to be careful that we don't find Jesus under every rock, because there are some people that go too far. They stretch too much. I think if you go through Joseph's story, it's pretty clear that there's these parallels. But some people want to find Jesus under like the strangest places. And we want to be careful of that. We should recognize when it's clear. I think Moses on a hill with 2 other guys and the arms are being held up, it looks like a picture of the cross to me. And victory is found when he's lifted up, right? When he's raised up, there's victory. So I think those are obvious kind of pictures. The same is true of the Exodus event when on the night of the Passover, when they put the blood on the sides of the doors and on the top. If you were to put a person up in front of that, that would be, the blood would be the top of the cross, and the sides would be where the hands would go. I mean, I think, again, you've got this crucifixion picture over the door of those who are safe. They're safe by the blood of the Lamb. So it's very important, I think, that we recognize the picture of Christ crucified, raised from the dead throughout the Old Testament. And again, that this is not some afterthought. This has been the plan of God from the beginning. And he's brought it to fulfillment, which means he's faithful, he's trustworthy. We can trust him. Not only can we trust him because we can see that he was faithful to bring about Jesus and that the sacrifice happened and that we can be saved in him, but that he's coming again, that he's going to restore all things. So the promises that God gives us after the cross now are just as sure. And we can say, listen, he promised the cross from the very foundation of the earth, very foundation of human history, all the way through. He brought it to fulfillment. We can trust him when he says, Jesus is coming back, and then he's going to take us on to glory. It's good news there. Okay. Here is what I would ask you to take home and reflect on this week. So I'd ask you to reflect on the fact that just because we're saved and washed in the blood of the Lamb does not mean that we will never face dark, difficult times. Think again back to what's going on with Israel. They have been freed, they have been rescued, they've been brought out, and yet they're seeing trial after trial after trial. And it's suffering in different forms and fashion. And what is the big point? The big point is they must remain faithful to God, continue to cling to him in the good times and in the bad, continue to pray, continue to ask him for help. But we will walk through tough times, but he walks with us through those tough times. So if you're suffering, and who here has not gone through some kind of suffering, you're in good company. You're in the company of the people of God. But you're also in the company of the one who is greater than all these things, who can bring you through. So reflect on these truths. Just because we have been saved and redeemed by the blood of the Lamb does not mean that we won't face difficult or dark times. It's really, what are we going to do when we face those times? And if you're in it now, the question is, what are you doing? What will you do? If you're not in it yet, you're gonna go in it. Jesus promised tough times. What are you gonna do when you're going through it? Those are the things. Think about, reflect on that. All right. Questions, thoughts, comments before we close in prayer this evening? Hopefully that wasn't too much of a sermon for you. I got one.
I got one for you.
Go ahead.
Did somebody else want to say something?
I don't think so. Go for it.
Okay. Whenever Philip talked to the Ethiopian eunuch, what part did he teach him out of the Old Testament?
Yes, out of Isaiah 53. My favorite Old Testament passage is Isaiah chapter 53. My favorite New Testament passage is Ephesians chapter 2. But yes, he taught him out of Isaiah 53. Who has believed our message, and to whom is the honor?
Is that your opinion, or can you verify that?
Is it my opinion that he taught him out of Isaiah? Or can
Isaiah 53.
Yes, no, that's verifiable. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's what I needed to know.
I like the little pushback. Yeah. Is that your opinion? You making that stuff up? Hey, you never know.
Check.
I could make stuff up. You just don't know. So, but no, it's in Isaiah 53 that he's a passage in there. Yeah. Yeah.
James, when you talked about Joseph, is my recollection correct that there was also foreshadowing with his brother Judah, who's of course up the lineage of Christ, offering himself as a substitute?
Yes.
Or, I'm thinking like when Benjamin was to be held back, he said, "No, no, my Lord, let me stay instead."
Yes.
kind of
Was
a
it?
picture.
I can't recall if it was specifically Judah. It may very well have been. I'd have to go back and look. But yes, one of the brothers
I'm
did.
pretty sure it was Judah, and that made the connection to Jesus even stronger.
Yeah, I think you're right. But to be 100%, I'd have to go back and look. But I
Okay.
think you're correct that it is Judah. And I think it's Judah in light of Tamar. If you think about that connection as well, where he had done some unrighteous things.
Yeah.
He has grown. So there's some growth that goes on with Judah as well. But yeah, you're right. There's a connection between Judah offering himself as a substitute for his brother. Take me, not him. And that's what Jesus says. Jesus says, I'll take their punishment. Take me and not them. Yeah, good point. I mean, there's a lot of them. They're all over the place. Daniel and the lion's den. We could spend a long time talking about the parallels, the typology, the symbolism that all points to Jesus. In fact, we know this is the case because Jesus on the road to Emmaus says, it says in there that he opened up the scriptures and taught them about himself, how the Christ must suffer and die and then on the third day be raised. No, he doesn't tell us the details, but the only scriptures they had was the Old Testament, right? After the resurrection, they didn't have the New Testament written. So they only had the Old Testament. Yeah, good stuff. All right. We're pretty much out of time. So let's have a prayer and we'll close this down.